You felt it before, the quiet collapse of connection. You're speaking, trying to sound thoughtful, friendly, understood. But something changes. The other person begins to withdraw. Their responses shorten, their attention drifts elsewhere. You didn't say anything offensive, yet a subtle dissonance grows. When you walk away, there's an emptiness, a sense that something in your energy was off. It wasn't your words, but the way they carried your restlessness, your insecurity, your need to be seen. The Stoics believed that our speech reveals the quality of our soul. It is not merely communication, but reflection of our fears, our intentions, and our self-command. The disorder of the tongue begins with the disorder of the mind. A calm voice doesn't come from training, but from inner stillness. And when we lose that stillness, we don't just sound anxious, we quietly push people away. Epictetus once said, "Nature gave us one tongue and two ears, so that we may listen twice as much as we speak." To the Stoics, speech was not a casual act, it was a moral one. Every word was a test of clarity, control, and truth. Marcus Aurelius practiced the discipline of measured expression. He reminded himself, "Let your words be both necessary and natural, the speech of a man who seeks what is right." To him, conversation was not performance, but proof of mastery. We speak endlessly today, yet understand little about the weight of what leaves our mouths. Most people talk to escape silence, not to communicate. They fill the air with excess, with explanations, defenses, subtle performances. The Stoic ideal is different. Speak to serve, not to shine. Speak less, but mean more. Because when the mind is ordered, words naturally follow their proper measure. When the mind is scattered, even eloquence becomes noise. Habit 1. Over-explaining yourself. Over-explaining is a soft form of fear, the fear of being misunderstood, rejected, or seen as harsh. It's the compulsion to clarify every sentence, to smooth every edge. You say, "I didn't mean it that way," or "I just wanted to say," or "I hope that makes sense." You believe you're building understanding, but what you're really building is tension. People rarely dislike over-explaining because of its content. They dislike what it reveals: uncertainty. The moment you over-justify, you unconsciously teach others not to trust your first truth. It's a habit born from emotional hypervigilance. You read micro-expressions, search for signs of discomfort, and rush to fill silence before it exposes you. But every extra word betrays the anxiety behind it. You appear less grounded, more apologetic, as if you need permission to exist. Sometimes it happens after years of being misunderstood or criticized. You've trained yourself to cushion every statement, but the result is exhaustion, for you and for them. A Stoic sees this as wasted energy, speech serving fear instead of virtue. Marcus Aurelius said, "If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it." That is the cure. Once your intention is honest, explanation becomes unnecessary. A Stoic learns to let words breathe, to say something once, clearly, and let it stand. The silence after your statement is not danger, it is power. If the other misunderstands, you let it be, because truth does not chase those unwilling to see it. When you stop pleading to be understood, you discover a strange peace, that those meant to understand you will, and those who don't were never truly listening. The wise man leaves his truth standing quietly in the room, untouched by the storm of opinion. That is Stoic confidence, saying less, yet meaning everything. Habit 2. Subtle one-upmanship. This is one of the most invisible habits that erode connection. It's not arrogance, but insecurity wearing a smile. Someone shares a small victory, and you instinctively counter with your own. They mention their difficulty, and you offer something worse from your life. You believe you're relating, but you're competing, and though the competition is polite, it quietly corrodes trust. The Stoics would call this vanity in disguise. Seneca warned, "He who seeks to be admired ceases to be loved." Every act of one-upmanship, however small, reveals that we haven't yet mastered envy or the need for significance. Most people don't even notice they're doing it. The impulse comes fast to prove you're equally capable, equally wounded, equally relevant. But real confidence never needs comparison. Consider this. When a friend shares good news, your first impulse might be to match it. "You got promoted? I was just offered something similar." It feels natural, but in truth, you've shifted attention away from them. What was a moment of connection becomes a quiet contest. A Stoic does not seek to outshine, but to understand. He knows that letting another person's story stand unchallenged is a mark of strength, not weakness. When someone shares, let their light exist beside yours. You don't need to dim or match it. The calm listener earns more respect than the constant responder. There's power in restraint. When you no longer need to insert yourself, you become magnetic. Because stillness, not performance, creates safety. People remember those who make them feel seen, not measured. To resist the urge to compete is to master the ego's quiet hunger, and that is rare strength. Habit 3, speaking to impress, not to connect. We all meet them, the conversational performers. Every word feels rehearsed, every sentence over-engineered to sound profound. They don't talk to connect, they talk to impress. Yet what's left after they finish speaking is not admiration, but exhaustion. Epictetus said, "If you wish to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid." The Stoics saw the desire to appear intelligent as a symptom of insecurity. It means we value perception more than truth. When you craft every sentence for effect, you trade authenticity for polish. But connection isn't born from brilliance, it's born from sincerity. Marcus Aurelius admired people who spoke without affectation, without falsehood, without self-praise. To him, humility in speech was a form of power, because a calm sentence from a sincere mind carries more force than a clever one from an anxious heart. You don't need poetic phrasing to move others, you need presence. Speak not to display what you know, but to reveal what you understand. The correction is simple. Choose usefulness over impressiveness. Let your words serve the moment, not your ego. When you notice yourself trying to sound wise, pause. Ask, am I sharing this to connect or to be admired? The first builds bridges, the second builds walls. Remember, people don't recall how articulate you were. They recall how comfortable they felt in your presence. The Stoic speaks not to shine, but to illuminate, and that light, when quiet, reaches farther than eloquence ever could. Habit 4. Interrupting out of impatience. Impatience in conversation is a subtle violence. You might think you're helping move things along or finishing someone's thought, but in truth, you are denying them the dignity of arrival. To interrupt is not merely to speak over, it is to assume ownership of another person's sentence. It reveals the ego's hidden belief: my mind moves faster than yours. Seneca warned, most powerful is he who has himself in his own power. When you interrupt, you show the opposite, that you are ruled by impulse, not reason. The Stoics valued the discipline of listening as an act of governance. The ability to hold silence, even when you already know what will be said, is a sign of mastery. It requires slowing down the reflex to dominate the flow of conversation. Notice how it feels when someone cuts you off mid-thought. The sentence dies before it finds meaning. Something in you withdraws. Your willingness to open up fades. The same happens each time you interrupt others. You don't merely break their sentence, you break trust. Sometimes impatience hides behind enthusiasm. You interrupt because you're excited. But real enthusiasm doesn't rush. It receives. It lets others complete their thoughts fully, because understanding grows only when silence is allowed to exist. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Be tolerant with others and strict with yourself." In practice, this means waiting for someone's final word before forming your next one. It's a test of restraint. The Stoic correction is to listen without strategy, not to reply, but to comprehend. Breathe once before responding. Let stillness replace the impulse to rush. The most intelligent speakers are those who wait, because silence, when chosen deliberately, carries more authority than any clever interruption ever could. Habit 5. Fishing for validation. Few things quietly repel others more than need disguised as conversation. You've seen it. The person who hints, downplays, or self-deprecates just to hear comfort in return. "I'm probably not that good at this," they say, waiting for reassurance. Or, "You probably didn't like it," hoping you'll disagree. This habit is not evil, it's human, but it carries an invisible weight. It turns every exchange into emotional labor for the listener. The Stoics understood that needing praise is a form of slavery. Epictetus said, "If you wish to be invincible, then do not enter into contests where victory is not in your control." Validation from others is precisely that, beyond your control. When your sense of worth relies on response, you become quietly manipulative without realizing it. You speak to receive approval, not to express truth. Over time, people sense the transaction behind your words, the subtle demand to be reassured, and they pull away. A Stoic trains himself to derive worth from alignment with reason, not recognition. When you know you've done well, you no longer need others to confirm it. When you know you've erred, you correct it inwardly without broadcasting your doubt. The cure is to speak from self-containment. If you share a struggle, share it to reveal, not to solicit rescue. If you share success, do it with calm gratitude, not for applause. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily, do not value yourself by what others think of you. When you no longer depend on praise, your presence becomes lighter. People relax around you. They feel no emotional pull, only stability. True confidence is silent. It doesn't whisper, "Am I enough?" It simply acts and lets the act speak. The Stoic does not seek to be admired. He seeks to be free. Habit 6. Conversational negativity. Negativity is contagious, not through loud complaints, but through subtle tones, sighs, and the habit of always finding what's wrong. Some people believe they're being realistic, but Stoicism teaches that realism without hope becomes cynicism, and cynicism repels connection. A person who constantly highlights flaws unknowingly creates emotional drag. Their words become heavy, their presence draining. People avoid them not because they're cruel, but because they sap vitality. Seneca wrote, "It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more, that is poor." Negativity stems from craving for ideal outcomes, for a world that always meets expectation. When reality fails to obey, complaint becomes the default language. The Stoic instead practices gratitude, not blind optimism, but the discipline of noticing what remains functional, meaningful, or good enough. This doesn't mean denying pain, but refusing to dwell on it until it becomes identity. In conversation, this means resisting the impulse to critique everything: the weather, the government, the traffic, the people. These small complaints slowly poison perception. Imagine speaking with someone who brings a steady calm, who doesn't flinch at inconvenience. Their composure soothes the room. That's the power of Stoic optimism, grounded, not delusional. To correct negativity, examine your default lens. Ask, do my words expand peace or contract it? Before speaking, filter your comment through usefulness. If it adds no order, no understanding, no grace, let it remain unsaid. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts." And speech, in Stoic psychology, is thought made audible. The calm speaker does not avoid darkness, he frames it. He speaks of hardship without transmitting despair. In that quiet balance lies rare magnetism, the kind that comforts without needing to fix. The Stoics never taught speech as charm, but as virtue. The way we talk is not a social skill, but a mirror of our discipline. Overexplaining shows a restless mind, oneupmanship, an insecure one. Interrupting reveals impatience. Negativity exposes discontent, but awareness is liberation. You're not condemned by these habits. You're simply called to see them, to observe without judgment and adjust with intention. The Stoic practice of self-examination, the nightly review, remains one of the most practical tools. Where did I speak with ego? Where did I speak with clarity? Where was silence the wiser choice? When you begin to ask these questions, speech transforms from performance into practice. You stop talking to be liked and begin speaking to align your soul with truth. And slowly you notice, your words grow fewer but heavier, your voice quieter but more trusted. That is Stoic speech, where calm becomes power and awareness becomes elegance. What are your views on this? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I will personally read all of your comments. And if you seriously want to level up in life, don't forget to show some love by hitting the like and subscribe button. Stay strong. Until next time.